this is part of what I wanted to start off with is what do we consider is the anti-war or social justice movement. When Snow formed here at Garfield and went out into neighborhoods, we had groups of longtime activists, as you see sitting here, but we also got from those neighborhoods people who had never been involved in anything before, some of them young, some of them not. And they were all very hopeful before the Iraq War that something could be done to prevent the war. And as you probably all know, February 15th, there was a huge demonstration worldwide. Here we had the biggest demonstration ever in Seattle, opposing the war. And at least in my neighborhood in Fremont, some of our young activists viewed it almost as the last hope. They had been working hard, the government wasn't listening, it looked like the war was inevitable. They pushed hard right through February 15th, came up with this huge demonstration. It made no difference, and they, to a person, quit. Now, do you consider them part of the anti-war movement? Even though they're out there, they still believe the war is wrong, but they're not working actively with us. That's one question. The other thing that I'd like to say is, compared to the Vietnam era, when I was a student activist at the University of Washington, we have now many more people who are opposed to war, who are very conscious of social justice issues at every level of society, everywhere. And yet, somehow we are less effective than a much smaller anti-war movement during the Vietnam era was. And why is that? Why are we less effective, given that we are more numerous and have, one would think, more power in society? As far as possibilities with Obama being elected and this movement of hope and expectation, I think we now have a situation where we have in office, or will have in office, I guess, is he sworn in?
He'll be sworn in tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow. Tomorrow we will have in office someone who is smart, who understands what's going on, who understands the things that we've been saying. And yet he will be head of a system that is the same system his predecessor headed, and that system produces war. It will be, I think, more possible to have an effect, but we have to understand that the system that he's in is going to have his ear, he's going to be responding, and we will not be able to simply raise our hand and say, oh, we think the war is bad, won't you change it for us? It's not going to work that way. In Vietnam, we had to take over universities, absolutely take them over, throw out the president of the Board of Regents, say, this is our university, it's not yours. We're taking over. When the CIA came to campus, we took over the building. They were interviewing candidates for the CIA, and we stopped traffic on the freeway. We made a huge mess. And within the military, the same thing went on, partly because of the draft. There were a huge percentage of people in the military that didn't want to be there, didn't want to go to war, and the whole thing came to a stop. But the system remained in place, the war economy remained in place, and wars continued. So I think that's our challenge, is having an administration that will understand what we're saying, but won't necessarily be able to do anything about it unless we force the issue. And having the power, being in more places besides just campuses, having the power to do something, but we need to step out and say, this is our city, this is not Mayor Nichols' city, and take it over and start making it an anti-war and pro-social justice city, rather than asking the current leaders, who are really in the pocket of developers, etc., in this city, and who allow the system to continue to operate, and the system creates war. We need to say, this is ours, this is not yours. So that's all I have to say.
One of the things that Steve touched upon that I also want to talk about a little bit is that phrase, hope. Over the holidays, I had a chance to see the film Milk, about Harvey Milk, who was an activist. And one of the things that was really striking to me was that, there was a theme of hope that struck me as very familiar, like I had to go back and look at some of the documentary footage to make sure that really Harvey Milk had been talking about hope in the 70s. And it wasn't just some recasting of what Obama has talked about and what his campaign focused on. And indeed, he did talk about hope a lot. The other thing is that during the course of Harvey Milk's organizing for gay rights, for which he was killed, he ran for office a number of times. And one of the times he ran for office, he ran against a politician who was very much in the mainstream. But they were very cordial with each other. And one of the things that's depicted in the film is this other politician saying to Milk, you can't just be against things, you've got to give them hope if you're going to be around for the long haul. So one of the things that I think both is an opportunity right now, but also a challenge to those of us who have worked for peace with justice, is finding the hope and making it real, making it something beyond just sort of the catchphrase of yes we can, or we're all hopeful, or whatever. Because I'm just going to say things are not going to change on Wednesday morning. Some things will change a little bit, and a number of the other workshops deal with some of those specific issues. So one of those issues that I'd probably be in a workshop about, except I'm in here, is around torture and the closing of Guantanamo. So we know that President-elect, soon-to-be President Obama, Attorney General has said that waterboarding is torture. Well, that's great, and it is. And it's good to have somebody who's going to be in a position of authority say that. And it's good to know that Obama is probably going to sign a piece of legislation, an executive order, on Wednesday, starting the closing of Guantanamo. However, those of us who work around issues of torture know that there are a lot of questions that remain, like how quickly is Guantanamo going to be closed? They've been talking about maybe in a year. Well, Human Rights Watch and other folks will tell you that really you can close it much more quickly and efficiently than that in 3 months. What's going to happen to all the CIA black spots around the world where people have been tortured? Are they going to close? What's going to happen to Bagram Air Force Base in Afghanistan, where, much like Abu Ghraib, people have been tortured and held? Speaking of Afghanistan, for us, in terms of foreign policy, one of the things that President-elect Obama ran on was getting us out of Iraq. That's good. But putting us into Afghanistan. Well, we in the peace and social justice movements would say, not so good. So what's going to happen, and how are people going to respond to that? There are lots of other issues. Gaza is another. There's a workshop going on about Palestine right now. What's going to be the position of the new administration? And as Steve said, even understanding and believing that Obama is someone who thinks more like I do, like maybe many of us do, than President Bush, he still is working with the apparatus of foreign policy and the corporate interests and the military interests that have us where we are today. So what difference is all of that going to make? One of the challenges, I think, for us and for everybody in this room is how to continue to raise issues when you don't have that nice, convenient, bullseye target, George Bush. How do you talk about things in a constructive way? How do you continue to mobilize people to work for issues around peace and justice? Obviously, there's also a lot going on with the economy and how that impacts everybody and all issues, including issues around war, reconstruction, peace, and justice issues. And it's a challenge for all of us. And the last thing I will say is that one of the things that troubles me at night is that there is a lot of energy out there. There are, 3 million people supposed to be in Washington tomorrow. There are a lot of people here who are going to watch it and celebrate it as this positive thing. But it's only the